Welcome, and thank you for joining us as we continue our conversation on inclusion in the outdoors. My name is Nick Sargent, president of SIA, and I couldn't be more proud of this sponsored panel here today and continuing the conversation about the outdoors and how the outdoors is open to everyone. It's going to be a great conversation. We've got a great panel here, as you're going to hear from in just a minute. So to get things going, I just wanted to introduce Conrad, doesn't really need an introduction, but athlete and explorer. Stan, photographer and podcast host and SIA board member. And Dhani, former former NFL player and TV host and outside board member. So with that, have a great panel.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
So first of all, my name's Stan, and I want to thank you all for being here and listening to our guests here, Conrad, Anker, and Dhani. I'm really pleased and privileged that you guys would join me for a little talk up here about some of the topics of DEI, climate change, business, and culture. And for me, I'm just going to kind of start right into it, and I kind of want to give a quick story about some of my experiences because as a photographer in the outdoors. And for me, what's kind of pivotal is looking at things from perspective, right? And so I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with snowboarding or skiing, but there's a thing called urban snowboarding. It's called jibbing and riding rails and that type of thing. And so I want to tell a story about when I was working in snowboarding for a long time. I was off in Draper, Utah, and I was doing a shoot with some friends, and we were going to go slide this rail. And during the time I was there, and I had my tripod, and I'm obviously a pretty big size black man, and the cops got called on us. And so, as you know, as any halfway smart black person hears when the cops called, you run and hide. Just being completely honest, you know? Just because systematic racism is a real deal. And so in that space, I sat there and I laid in the snow and I hid in the bushes for about an hour until the cops came, and they called 6 cop cars. And when they finally came out and got done, and I came out of the bushes and I talked to my friends, what had happened is one of the neighbors who were doing this rail had called and said there was a big black guy out there with a machine gun selling drugs. And so I just want you to think about the perspective of outdoors and kind of the things that, for me, because of the color of my skin, I risk as far as going to the outdoors, and it's just a different perspective. You know, it's a very real and dangerous thing to find that acceptance. And as we tackle DEI today, right, everyone comes to this realization that, wow, we've got racism, and it's a real and it's apparent and it's a real problem. And everyone thinks that they would run into the burning building. Everyone wants to save everything right now. And the reality of it, there's real consequence and there's real different perspectives. And for me, running into the burning building, you risk job advancement, you risk personal targeting, and you risk jail if you're going to do a protest as a black person. And so when you look at that and you're looking at these companies and what you're doing as far as DEI perspectives, I just want you to understand what someone like myself has to go through to get to this position, to this point in life, and you might not see or understand what's going on in this space. And so I just want you to accommodate for that. And thinking about that as far as, you know, good judgment requires experience, and experience is gained through judgment. And so you're looking at these things, and I've had lots of bad judgment, so I'm pretty much an expert now. And for me, is looking at these things and trying to find things even today, where recently a Michigan realtor was showing a house to these prospective buyers, and they got the cops call on them. So a drug deal. And so you look at this is still going on, and so looking at these things, and I just want people to, when they're coming to company policy and looking at what they can do, and also what they're potentially sacrificing, what you're actually putting on the line. And so when you put that on the line, and when you see people up here, what Dhani or Conrad or myself put on the line to try and bring equality to the outdoors, it is like there's consequence. And so within that, like for me, looking at now with companies, there's just this thing where everyone's looking at doing a DEI program or doing HR resources or bringing people to figure out how they want to do it, right? Like, here's how we're gonna do. And they're rolling out slick Instagram campaigns and wonderful ads of beautiful, happy, shiny people. And I just want people to really think about what they're doing and how they're doing it. Because, has anyone here been to a Cars and Coffee? Okay, we've got one person over here who knows what Cars and Coffee is. Dhani knows what Cars and Coffee is. So Cars and Coffee is a thing where basically rich elderly men get together and they go and they bring out their fast cars and they park them in the parking lot and they show them off. And it's, basically a bunch of people will be check out my new toy, kind of thing like that. And so realistically, what's interesting to me is who's willing to drive the car and who can drive the car when it comes to driving on the track. And one of the things that's really breached me as far as having DI and then really being able to drive that car on a track is my relationship with Conrad. And he's one of the people who, through his work through North Face, working with Black Ice, working and mentoring minorities to try and get in the outdoors and just being a source for opportunity and inclusion, Conrad's got his foot on the gas. And he is really, really pushing, supplementing things from his income, from his perspective, to try and help push this narrative. So I think what I want companies to take away from this is I want you to be a driving force. I want you to be a driving force in trying to make DEI something that it's actually it's not a flashy post or an Instagram post. It's a consistent commitment day to day of driving that track, trying to get faster, trying to push the limits and move things along. So with that, I think pretty much I've kind of rambled a bit, but I wanted to go ahead and move into some media and marketing, and I think Conrad and Dhani can talk about some of the things that they've seen in media marketing nowadays.
Well, I'll say this, welcome, everybody. I think as you look around, this wasn't an opportunity to talk maybe several years ago. So I think you should all give yourself a round of applause.
Thank you for showing up.
And really look at each other, because this is a rather diverse room, especially when you think about the world of outside. I see some faces that I know, people that I've yet to meet, but I'm excited because the complexion of the industry is shifting. And I come from the football world, and we all have been there for a long time, right? But my passion in the world of outdoor sports was my original love. I was 8 years old, and I started skiing. Had my first yard sale, and I was like, I'm done with all those things. I'm gonna go ahead and get this one board, these 2 boots, these 2 gloves, and this jacket and these pants. I'm gonna figure it out. And I think some toilet paper cushion in my butt, and a couple, sore wrists, I was able to figure out the beauty of the mountain. But much like Stan was talking about, I encountered some unique circumstances as I was, taking it to the mountain, feeling good about myself, and I would get racial expletives thrown at me from the lifts. I would get these looks when I get into the line because there was nobody out there. There's not a single person. I felt like I was on an island. But my past of being a military child, talk about perspective, gave me understanding that there's going to be some uncomfortable circumstances that you have to live through. And there's going to be some uncomfortable conversations that you have to have with people. And not everybody's going to like you. You know, we travel. We lived in Japan. We lived, throughout the Asia, and in different states and different parts of the world. Not everybody's going to agree with your point of view, and not everybody's going to understand you. And so I always took the angle of, let's identify our common ground. Instead of you calling me names, I'm going to talk about how badass your board is. And then you're going to talk about how amazing my board is. And then we're going to find some common ground to meet at, and then talk about our love of outside, and then really get to the meat and the challenge of the industry. And so that carried me into the world of sports and into the world of media, where I was therefore able to sort of express myself, coming off of playing 11 years in the NFL. And I would say the next transformative moment, talking about the industry, was when I got to travel around the world and play sports pretty much on every single continent. And that was another eye-opening experience, of which I got to meet people who didn't necessarily see anybody that looked like me, especially in the mountains of Switzerland near Interlaken. Think about that. I'm competing in a sport called schwinging. I want to be careful how to pronounce it, because some of you all might misinterpret me. But you're in the mountains of Meiringen, or Meiringen, and there are these Swiss giants that are out there, blonde hair, blue eye. And here's this black fellow that came up there to wrestle against them. And let's just say it was challenging in a lot of different ways. But in the same way that I met those people at the bottom of the lift, I met them in the same way in the sawdust pits of which we wrestle against one another. And then once you leave, after you've identified that common bond of competition, we were therefore able to work through our differences as people. And I think that media is adding to that overall conversation, and which ultimately allowed all of us to come here today.
Okay. So to actually touch on that, I'd like to talk to, obviously, Conrad Anker, world-esteemed mountain climber, and found George Mallory's body in 1999, and just recently he served as a mentor for Black Ice, which was a film featuring black ice climbers from Memphis that Conrad mentored. But one of the conversations we've been talking about, because Conrad actually grew up in Japan, and the importance of respect for other cultures. And so one thing that Dhani and Conrad both share is they've traveled more than I have, but obviously going into other people's homes and places and respecting their cultures and customs and learning about that, it's something that I'd love for you to talk about, Conrad.
Yeah, thank you, and hello everyone. What a real treat to be here. So this is the thing. The commonality we all share in this room is that we see the benefit of getting outdoors. When we go to nature from our oversubscribed, busy life, we defrag the hard drive, so to say. We're in with trees, and it's nature, and it's this connection to us. And in the process, we have a way in which we communicate with other humans that's supportive and with good intention, and there's something positive about that, because when we were hiking 2 weekends ago, it wasn't, I'm gonna hike faster than Stan. It was, there could be a grizzly bear out here. That's the challenge. What are we going to do to kind of to be together as a team with that? So that fundamental message of being outdoors, and the more that we can share that in the outdoor world, from skiing, snowboarding, climbing, hiking, rafting, it's that same way in which we bring it together. And to be able to experience cultures other than your own, other than where you're at, and to see that everyone, at the end of the day, has the same goals and aspirations of being comfortable, of being with a family and not harming other people, and that the more that we can bring that together, the better off we are. And that is sort of the
ethos.
Yeah, to go out there and with Memphis Rocks, which is it's a community center as a climbing gym, but it's in South Memphis, and Tom Shediak, film producer, gifted it to the city, and it runs as a way to encourage people. And so for a lot of young black people in South Memphis, they had no idea what indoor climbing or climbing was like. So they come here, and it's also, there's a garden, there's a wood shop, there's a food service there, and it's really
building community.
It's building community, and the community that we have in climbing is based on, you're on belay, the three of us are gonna climb that mountain together. And if I start sending you like, I'm gonna be better than you, or being weird about that, then we're gonna fail. But if it's like, you're checking up on me and you're checking up on him, then you're always, you notice the other person there.
And we're all gonna succeed.
And yeah, not get hurt.
Yeah. So something that I wanted to touch on, obviously being a photographer, is looking at media and marketing. And something that's been kind of coming to mind to me lately as somewhat of a policy for diversity and equity inclusion, but it's not as well thought out, is there's something that Conrad and I have been talking about, and we were talking about on our hike just recently in Montana, and it's been the uprise of newfluencers. And I made that term up, and it's pretty interesting because I look at it where for companies and their program, they're looking at trying to find young, vibrant, diverse people, you know, with 10 to 20,000 followers and get their brand narrative across, right? And so within that comes good and bad, because what happens is people end up coming to experts like Conrad or myself and trying to navigate these waters. And again, it comes back to good judgment requires experience, and experience is gained through bad judgment. So what we're looking at is when we're going at and trying to approach equality and diversity, there's a whole list of really educated, smart people who have been working in this industry that I didn't necessarily know about. You know, James Edward Mills is here, and he used to work with Conrad as a rep at North Face 30 years ago. And it's things where like I call and ask him questions because there's things that I don't know. There's Philip Henderson, who was a climber, who is a photographer, who I didn't know about until Conrad introduced me to him. But he's been climbing mountains for years, and it's things like that where I think it's like trying to find this new class of people who can influence and push media, but also give homage to the people who have been doing the work for a long time and can help them navigate these waters, because a lot of times, yes, you can take a photo and you can post it on Instagram, but how is that going to translate your project to a CMO or a VP of finance to get funding for your project? And so it's trying to help navigate people to create lasting change. And so someone who's been really good at that lately is Kai Leitner. And I don't know if you follow him on Instagram, but you should. Kai has been pushing the narrative. He's a 21-year-old kid who really takes these matters seriously. He's thoughtful, he thinks about it, he takes experience that's going on from him and his family. And some of the things that I do from me and my family, my parents are here, there's their mom and dad. So little things that you know, it's like it's not just the outdoor world, but I'm gonna just go, I'm like, Dad, what was the first sit-in you sat in? What year was the sit-in that you went to with Ida Wells?
1968, with Blair Littler.
Okay. So when I look at that and I'm asking about how to go about these projects, that's the knowledge I'm coming from. So my dad, how old were you?
11.
Okay. So my 11-year-old dad going to his first sit-in in 1968 translates to me being up here. What? 50. Damn, you're old. Like that. So it's looking into past generations, taking that knowledge and building foundations on top of each thing. And so that's where we're looking at these distribution systems, where something that like really like keys into me now is looking at something where Dhani of like endorsement deals, right? So you coming out from football and looking at endorsement deals that you had, now we've got a whole new landscape of where the NCAA just dropped rules on endorsement deals for college players. So when you look at now influencers and how you're going about to do multicultural marketing to a young base, it just completely got shifted to a younger age bracket where now you're gonna have student athletes, you're gonna have student agents, and you're gonna have products that you're going to there. So maybe you can kind of touch on that and see how you think that world's going to shake out to be.
It's an exciting world, and for those that don't understand, it's a name, image, and likeness, which is essentially happening. That basically means that if you are somebody and somebody feels as though they want to sponsor you, then they can, right? And I think it just opens up an opportunity for different brands and different people to start generating an income from a passion and a love in the sport that they desire. It also comes with its challenges, right? Because of what you just talked about. There's going to be these agents that all of a sudden show up at people's doors. I was just reading, or I was listening the other night on the news talking about how a lot of the agents are starting to approach young athletes through the Instagram and TikTok channels, right? So with opportunity, there also comes these challenges. When we think about the world of football, it's the same, and even that much more amplified as the stage is that much greater. But I think all in all, right, as brands, it gives you an opportunity to reach people at an earlier time. It gives an opportunity to talk to diverse audiences at an earlier stage, right? I said I got into skiing when I was 8 years old. A lot of people may not have been able to kind of experience or see that until they were much older. And so, I would invite you to think about how and when you kind of are now able to be a part of these influencer communities, so that not only they participate, but then other people see them and they're motivated by them as well, so that they continue to participate as well.
So to add on that, I don't know if many of you know, but Dhani here is a board member for Pocket Outdoor Media, which owns Outside, which Outside owns a bunch of titles. So my question to you is, how are you going to go about telling diverse stories and equitable stories with authenticity and involving that community for these outside publications?
I think, as Outsides continue to grow, it's just reaching people and at the same time listening, right? One of the great things that we have now is an opportunity, is because we are of that size and scalability, and we have tremendous amount of reach. Now we have to do our part and listen to those that are out there and ask them to contribute, right? And Robin Thurston, who's our CEO of Outside, he's always impressed that upon those that are in the organization. And I think that's important, right? And it comes from the CEO, and then it spreads throughout the organization, and then those in the organization are out there identifying and helping and talking to those so that they can be a part of the community as well. So I think it's an approach that takes time, right? It's an approach that takes openness and willingness, because maybe some people didn't have previously a great experience, right? I know how frayed the industry has been. When I talk to some of my friends that have been in the snowboard business, in the skiing business, a lot of people have not necessarily been so receptive. And so those come as challenges. Mm-hmm. And being an open organization that's being more welcoming, right? So that everybody feels as though they belong. Now it opens up opportunities for people to come and write about, talk about, and participate as the industry continues to grow.
Nice. One thing I did want to talk about, and has been included, is I want to shift gears a little bit to climate change, which is something that's been a bit on all of our minds. If you look at some of the fires burning right now and the floods in Germany, and just the global temperature being recorded and moved up to 1.1 degree. It was just recorded yesterday. And so in the talks with that, I'm going to hand this over to Conrad, because he is our expert from this panel, at least, because I'm no scientist. But he can talk a little bit, speak to that, and how he's doing that in everyday life and companies' approaches to that.
Yeah, we're at a crossroads. The International Panel on Climate Change released their report a couple days ago, and it was like, we're at the irreversible point. So we really need to get behind this and work hard to it. We essentially lost 4 years of being able to be climate aware, and now through the infrastructure bill that's in there, we have ways that we can build climate accessibility within that. The challenge with climate and what it's going to do is it's going to affect marginalized communities more than
First.
Yeah, and so people that look like me and come from where I'm at, yeah, I live in the mountains. I can escape it. I get a little bit of smoke every now and then, but for the millions of indigenous people that live on the coastline with the sea level rising, indigenous people that live in remote places that have their subsistence agriculture and that. And yesterday was World Indigenous Day through the with the United Nations. And so all of this is sort of coming in there. And as we all track climate change, the heat wave that came through Portland early in the summer, a scientist from Oregon State University, which is a leading institution for climate change, had a state-of-the-art temperature measuring system. And so in the leafy, well-to-do neighborhoods in Portland or up on the hill, it was 95 degrees. In the lower part of Portland, if you're familiar, where the cement and concrete, the temperatures were up to 120. And that discrepancy, when it was tied to zip code and mortality, there was a direct connection to it. And in that sense that we're all in this together, and I think we're kind of coming to this point where like climate denialism isn't going to be, there's not going to be space for you at the table, but more like what are the solutions that we can work towards and where are we at with it? And that's, and it's the intersectionality between environmentalism, the climate, social justice, and how we need to work on all three of those together.
And I think what it comes down to, and some of the things we've discussed, is shifting the advertising narrative, because you have things where, especially in the outdoor community, you have protect our winter, but when you look at that, it doesn't show the effects of who's going to get affected first. It shows the mountains, but realistically, it's people in the inner cities where the water levels are going to rise and flood people's homes, or people are going to die from heat exhaustion, or in Germany where floods are there. So I think it comes to shifting the narrative of advertising and getting more people involved. Because when you look at that and you live in a mountain town where like obviously it's like Denver or Jackson Hole or Tahoe, and getting people united and organized in these groups is one thing, but realistically to get climate change really changed, it's a numbers game. And so you have to look at trying to really mobilize people in New York and LA and getting inner city communities where there's a larger population base together to move, to activate, to push climate change to the forefront. And so that's something where I'm looking at that as far as, trying to do more multicultural marketing in that area to make more people that look like me aware of what climate change is doing and doing to our families and our homes, and how I can be part of a conduit to tell that story better and get people mobilized and change our way of life and the way we see things. Because a story that I share, and sometimes people maybe don't understand it in this way, when I lived in Brooklyn, you'd see walking down streets and stuff, and like kids would just throw garbage in the street. And to them, it's something like that where like, I asked a kid one day, and I'm like, why are you doing that? And he's like, it's someone else's job to clean that up. And so when you think about that in an inner city place, it might be someone's dad who's the garbage man or the janitorial or the custodian, thing like that. So they literally think it's someone else's job, and that they're actually like giving someone a job rather than understanding, like by picking that up and putting it in the right place. Your uncle or your dad's still going to have this job at that, but we can actually go, it's like looking for the greater goal, for bigger scale for community. And so it's changing that perspective of us looking out for like that one-to-one relationship as to a 1 to 100 relationship. Mm-hmm. So that's just something that Conrad and I have been talking about. And to further that goal is looking at things of like how to change government policy. And when you look at that as far as like voter suppression going on right now, right? And so voter suppression is normally happening mainly against minority communities. And so if you want to actually change climate change, you actually want to get more minorities voting, and you want to actually use them to leverage that to elect politicians that care about climate change. And so then you actually are getting government policy, and then you actually will have statewide or government-wide change moving down the road. So it's something that Deborah Lee, who used to be the CEO of BT, she's calling on organizations to fight restrictive voting laws for corporations. So it's just things of moving in that space and thinking of how we can have better impact and more thoughtful impact. It's not necessarily like using that strength. It's working smarter, not harder, to be completely honest. And so that's something that I care about, because like growing up in Alaska and seeing the communities there and wanting to enjoy the outdoors, it's something that's important to me. So
on a note on that, with climate and where it's at, the invisible Adam Smith free market is not going to solve this. It got us into it because we went crazy deep into that, and we're going to need market externalities that come via the government about pollution, that everything that kind of goes into that. And so we need to force that market externality via the government through legislation to help fast track this and reduce the subsidies we have for fossil fuel on the other end. And to me, in terms of voting, it's disheartening that we, coming out of this last election cycle under the guise of voter integrity, that we're making it more and more restrictive. And in my home state of Montana and fellow western state of Arizona, there have been recently enacted laws that are targeted at Native American communities. And you can parse down the electorate one way or another, but when it comes down to it, there's 40,000 votes that, had they gone a different way, we would have a different president today. Or it's 5,000 votes, and these 5,000 votes from this county tip that state in that direction. And to me, that is for the Native American communities that have been, we owe them a debt of gratitude and respect and recognition, and taking that ability to vote, which is the bedrock of our nation, it's not the right thing to do.
I would say, just to kind of summarize, everybody's got a different responsibility, right? And you might be the CEO of a company, or you might be, marketing, or you might just be a fan. Everybody's got an intrinsic, responsibility to help us understand and help us work through some of these challenges that we're dealing with, right? And so, I can only speak from my perspective of my life's journey, and just wanting to have a seat at the table. And I think going back to what you're saying in terms of, there will be those that sit at the table that work with those hand in hand in order to kind of create policy. That goes for climate. That also comes for diversity and inclusion. There will be those that are on the front lines that are fighting tooth and nail, advocating, and some people dealing with the challenges of that. And there will be other people that will be doing. And as you sit out here and listen to kind of us talk about our own personal experiences, you have to also identify where you fit, or where you think you fit into that channel, because it can be rather overwhelming. There's just so much to do, right? We're in this state of a lot of things that are happening all at the same time, and sometimes you don't know exactly what lane you can spend time in. But I just would ask you to think about where you think you fit in those changes along the way, with the companies or with people, or as a newfluencer, as Stan pointed out, in your life, because it's important to know that piece.
For sure. Something that I'm curious about, and I think it kind of goes back to perspective and how you see the world, is I'd like to hear more about yourself and Conrad's adventures, but specifically you, because you're on Dhani Tackles the Globe, which was on the Travel Channel. And for me, what did you learn from that experience? Like what things from going around the globe and meeting different people and experiencing like them welcoming into your home and the customs, like what are some perspectives that I think the outdoor industry can like take from that experience?
Yeah. And for those who haven't seen my show, it's okay. It's okay. You have an opportunity to do it right now. You can go home. You can download it on Hulu. It's all good. It's there. Discovery Plus, you can find it there too. After I played in the NFL for a while, or while I was in my transition phase, I got an amazing opportunity to travel around the world played different sports at the highest level, as I was talking before, in terms of swinging. I also did sambo, which was in Russia, and I got to climb to the base camp at Mount Everest. I went to, I forgot which peak I went to. It's like 20,000.
Island Peak?
Island Peak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lost my mind when I was up there. It's crazy. And you know what's crazy about that? I lost like 25 pounds when I was just walking.
Oh, yeah.
You know, here, I'll tell you a little story, right? So I'm up in this mountain. I'm a big dude, right? Right, this big dude became a little dude, right? In like a period of like that. It was so crazy, right? So my show, which I had a really great time doing, you know, they would be like, oh, why don't you just go out there and play rugby against these players? And, you know, and I was like, okay, cool. I did that. I fell off a horse, almost like busted my head open, and it's fine. Got in a couple fights, but it's fine. I made my way back. All these different sports. And then I get to go to Nepal to go climb the base camp in Mount Everest. I'm like, okay, this is just walking.
So when
This
I
is
go to
walking.
Maryland, I'm going to be a big dude.
Yeah. I'm like, this is just walking. So I'm like, I get to Kathmandu. This is really cool. Just jump on the airplane, head up to, where do we drop off?
Lukla?
Lukla. Oh my God, Lukla. First of all, the scariest flight you've ever had in your entire life. You land on this like itty bitty runway in the middle of the mountains on this itty bitty plane. It's like that. It's crazy, right? I'm like, okay, this is cool. I can do this. I put on this backpack, started walking. Man, a little out of breath. Just keep walking. Man, it's starting to get a little cold outside. Just keep walking, you know? And one of the tricks that you do, and you know, they have all these yaks up there, right? And so what you do is you take the yak dung, you put it into it starts the fire, and you put the water into the thermos, and you put the thermos in your sleeping bag so you can stay warm at night. I start still freezing, and I just burned so many calories throughout the entire walk to the top. And as soon as I got back home, make a long story short, I got back home, the same pants I put on, I tried to put them back on, they fell right off. I lost 25 pounds walking.
But it came back as muscle.
25 pounds. And oh, by the way, when I would do my travel show, I would actually get home on a Friday night, and training camp for football would happen on Saturday. So I would get home on a Friday night at 8 o'clock, and I would go right into training camp on that Saturday morning. So there's two things that I learned. One is that when you travel and you play different sports, you're able to build a certain capacity. A lot of times, you know, for parents that are out there, a lot of times you have your kids do one sport. Gotta allow them to play multiple sports, right? Give them opportunity to have fun and diversify their perspective of their body through sport. That was one. The second thing, and this is the most important piece I learned, this is related to your question, I learned about people. Part of the reason why the industry is slow to change is because the companies have been slow to change. And you're slow to change because you haven't seen new people. And when you travel outside your circles and you start meeting people and you start spending time with people, you start recognizing your commonalities with others. I always give the analogy of like if you're in the same neighborhood and you walk to your friend's house, your other friend's house, you never leave that neighborhood, you feel quite comfortable. But as soon as you leave that neighborhood and you go to a different state, you notice a different accent. You try different food. One of my friends, he has his kid eating spicy food as like a 1-year-old because your palate is set at such a young age. All of our palates and our experiences have been set at a young age. So it's challenging to step outside of the neighborhood. And sometimes you have to force yourself to go go get a passport and jump on an airplane and be okay with erasing the stereotypes that you might feel of different countries and different cultures and re-illustrate what you might see in the world. When you do that, you come back to your company and you look around at the people and you realize you want the company to reflect not just the company, right? But the state, the country, and the rest of the world. That's what I learned when I was traveling, right? I learned to see the differences, but the commonalities that we all share. So, and I also learned to see a smaller waistline too.
All right. One of the things that I wanted to really talk about was how to take a DEI initiative at the marketing and HR level. And one of the things is looking at how to scale it into business practices that translate to long-term brand values, add a sales component. And what you need to do is envision your customer, identifying prospective buyers, making lasting market decisions. And so from that, I would say, Conrad, you've probably worked in the outdoor space the longest. Like, what are some things that you're trying to show brands and businesses of having an athlete and old-fluencer?
Wow. Is someone writing that down?
Like yourself, take, like, what are some things that you would suggest?
Yeah, representation matters, and just as what people, what they choose or what they're given to eat at a young age influences further on. So at a young age, when we can introduce people to the outdoors, and for the thousands of young black children that saw you walk up to Everest Base Camp, they'd seen you as a football player or a basketball player or traditionally the sports that black people do. But for them...
Oh, by the way, I'm terrible at basketball, I just want to let you know.
That makes two of us. I'm horrible.
Terrible. I'm garbage.
But we
none
have
of you
that.
all would pick me to be on your basketball team, I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's erasing those stereotypes when you go over there, and it was an eye-opening to go climb a mountain and to see what it comes back for you. And that representation is, and by doing it in events that we share, by compensating the athletes that are the influencers, the people that are part of it, and then having that representation at the top level of the companies. It's got to be, we just can't be window dressing.
For sure. And I think something that kind of like I'd like to touch on is I think a lot of brands with their collabs and kind of like quick strikes, things like that, they're looking for lightning to strike, and you just look at Kanye just did a 10-year deal with Gap, and he released the round jacket and like sold out. I think it made $7 million in 35 minutes. So while people are looking at that, and realistically that's what everyone wants to do, they want to sell products, right? It's looking at, lightning's not going to strike every time. You will have lightning strikes, and you will have talented designers, and just by them extrapolating and bringing it on board, they're bringing in a new creative talent who maybe had a different perspective than anyone else at the Gap had, but also looking at how you can go about investing in the community, learning about those different types of practices, giving those people a place and a space to express themselves. And so I think it's more about looking at that long-term goals than just hoping for lightning to strike once and having this great hot collab deal. So something that I kind of want to do, I'm kind of got a quick conclusion, and I think we can probably take a few questions because we're actually moving pretty fast. But something that's important to me, and again, it's something that Conrad and I were talking about, and Dhani too, because we've shared a few chairlift rides, snowboarding out at Powder Mountain, so it's kind of funny to come full circle like this. What's it been, like 10 years? Mm-hmm. Is when we were hiking back, we went to, what was the falls we went to, Conrad, just recently? What was it?
Pioneer Falls.
Pioneer Falls in Montana and Spanish Peaks. So we're about 3.5 miles back, and we come to this waterfall, and like we're cruising and kind of hanging out, and Conrad's just out there like Free Willy, and the waterfall just getting after it. Super funny with his dogs, and I'm taking pictures.
We had to down climb to the base.
Thinking of that.
There's like a viewing place, and they're like, we're going to go down there.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like scoping while he's like in the waterfall, TLC. And and so I'm cruising, and I'm just kind of chilling, and I'm like looking around, and as it comes around this corner, comes this young black boy, and he's probably, how old would you say?
8, 9?
Yeah, and you can just tell by the realization of going all through the woods and coming back, and he saw me, and all of a sudden his eyes lit up, and you could just tell I was the last person he was expecting to see 3.5 miles back at this waterfall, And so we kind of continue, and me and Conrad kind of have a moment, we kind of like just watch, but it's funny because this kid is just watching me, he's like kind of watching what I'm doing, I'm kind of hiking around, and every once in a while I can just see his eyes on me the whole time.
He down climbs to the base of the waterfall.
Yeah, and he's like coming and checking it out. And so as we go out there, we're walking back and on the trail, and Conrad and I are laughing, and I was like, Conrad, do you do much market research on the trail? Because I feel like we just did a whole market research on the trail of all the different types of people we're cruising by and seeing, right? And as we come by, there's like a young transgender woman like hiking by with her crew, you know, like that, and like we noticed it, and like it's that, and we both kind of had a moment, and like what we're doing in this space is like 20 years ago, you have never seen this happen. You would have never seen that. I was just like seeing these people on the trail and just feeling that comfortable and in a space where you're like, okay, I'm accepted here and this is totally fine, and it's refreshing and relaxing. And what we're doing with this talk, with us combining, with us talking to these brands, is trying to make the outdoors accessible for everyone. And that is the real takeaway here, is just trying to like shift your perspective and figure out how you can invite people. It's like, how would you treat people when you invite people over to your home? What would you cook for them? What would you show them? What would you show them about your culture and music? And it's like, it's kind of like people take it as this aspect, but like realistically, it's like, I mean, I digress here, but like, it's like making it a block party where everyone kind of goes to, or a potluck, where like you're encouraging differences. You're encouraging people to show and share their stories and talk in their own perspective. And so that's what I want to take away, and what I hope like I've shared through my photos or my films or the things I write, is just trying to make it like a lot more of a joyous place, and place for people, like, because I'll be completely honest, growing up in Alaska, like my dad moved me there when I was 7 years old. Like, it's funny, we have the best stories. My mom was like, dressed me up on the plane, like this, no lie, you can ask her, she's right there, right? So we would go to Alaska, and like, I think I was actually 6 years old, because it hasn't been my birthday at the time. But I had 2 pairs of long underwear on, full pair of suit, get off the plane, it's like 80 degrees, I'm sweating, and like at that, like there. And so like, that was like, quote unquote, the black interpretation of Alaska. And we get there, there's no igloos, there's no dog sleds running around, it's just like normal people, and I'm just like, oh, this is Alaska. And it shaped the person that I am now. And it shapes each and all one of you from here, from being in the outdoors, and how you take that away. So I just want you to think and like share that joy, and be able to try and share it with another person or another friend, or people who haven't been able to have the opportunity to have a safe space. And that's kind of the real thing of what the work we're doing. So. I think Maggie's out there somewhere, but I think we have like 10 minutes for questions, and I know Dhani was really fired up on questions.
I love questions.
Because I'm thinking that, but you know, go ahead. Yeah, you're right there. Bam! Right there, we got you. You're right there, front row.
Hi, I'm Crystal Egley. I'm going to check as loud as possible. So we've heard a lot about diversity. What? Oh.
Maybe it's not working, but go ahead.
So anyway, as I was saying, there's a lot of diversity in the outdoors, but I feel like we haven't even gotten to equality, let alone equity, quite yet. And so I'm wondering if there's some tangible takeaways for individuals, but specifically companies, for equity in the outdoors.
I think I can take that one, because I think the whole tangible takeaways are hiring people that have been there. There's a whole community of Black and minority leaders out there that like, you have to dive deep. You can't just go at the surface level of the newfluencers. You have to actually like ask someone like James or Mills. You can talk to my dad about the Buffalo Soldiers. You can talk to Wendy back there about starting your own company that's diverse for running a company as a minority level. So I think what happens is people just aren't diving deep enough. And if you really want to go and find that, you have to ask questions of people who have already been there. Like, you know, like I'm sure you're looking at the thing and you're like, photographer, who is this guy? But the reason why I'm here and I'm on board, or you know, however you want to go about it, is like, I'm the first Black professional winter sports photographer. And like, while that's a great thing, it's also kind of a sad thing. You know, like, so it's like a hit or miss, you know, however you want to do it. But I've spent a lot of time making a lot of mistakes, making a lot of bad judgment, so I could get to a point of having good judgment and being here and trying to help and advise people. And me personally, I try and like do a mentorship of either 1 or 2 people a year. It's just something that I do. Me personally, I'm not advertising or broadcasting it, but I try and teach people the business ropes of that and send them on their way. And that's what I personally do. And I know like Conrad and Dhani, I'm sure they have been mentors to people there, but that's the best way I can answer it.
And real close to this, climbing gyms are offering a way to bring outdoors to inner cities. So as climbers, there's a responsibility of teaching the outdoors, but when I travel now, I don't go to bars, I go to climbing gyms, and people prefer going to climbing gyms than going to bars. And especially in places like the Bay Area or New York, you go to the climbing gym and it's far more diverse than, say, a bar might be, and they communicate. And that, if we can have that as a foundation and somehow translate that into being outdoors.
Yeah. Scaling. Okay. Maggie, you pick someone back there. Yeah.
Hello, my name's Brian from Virginia, and I have a small environmental nonprofit. And we do a lot of community work and trying to get everyone outside and just recreate responsibly and things like that. I'm wondering what maybe ways y'all have found for us to bridge the gap to the community for issues that might not be present to me, but are present and need to be addressed. Is there anything you guys have come across as ways that are good for folks, from our side of the table to get involved in the community?
I think I can take this one too. For me, the biggest thing that I see with the misconception that outdoor brands have is they're always trying to take people from their place of where they live and get them to the outdoors and experience there. And what it does is there's not opportunity and access for that to be sustainable. So what I think nonprofits and businesses really need to do is they need to go into the communities that they're actually trying to help, build a sustainable platform in the community there, like, whether it's like workshops or education or gardens. Like, it could be just something as like as simple as what's the word I'm looking for? Community gardens, right? It's something where like someone could go there and plant a tree or plant vegetables, and you're building community, and then you get to eat it afterwards. And again, block party, woo! There we go. But I think that's the main problem, that people always are trying to take people from the place that they live and make there, and they might not just be able to sustain that. And I think if you go there and you show that you're part of uplifting and bringing the community together and uplifting, what you're gonna do is you're gonna generate interest, and once you generate interest, people will find a way to get to the outdoors.
I think there's another piece in terms of disintent. A lot of people can set up a community garden with ill intent and the plants won't grow, right? But if you have the right intent, then they'll thrive. And so I think that's always like the first piece. And I think asking the question is the perfect start. But as Stan was talking, it's the proactive approach to going where people are instead of removing people from where they are to take them where you need to be. But in the end, it's also, it's also being able to balance between the two as well. Because eventually, people have to leave their surroundings in order to go to a new place. But it's about establishing trust first and foremost. In the back, the hat.
Oh, I had this.
Oh, sorry.
I got the microphone.
I see the microphone.
I have the stick.
Good.
My name is Karima. I'm mostly known for Adaptive Climbing Group, but in this context of my intersectionality, I'll just say I'm one of the administrators of Kyle Leitner's nonprofit, by the way. I took him to George Floyd's funeral, and that's what sparked our thing to create that nonprofit. In this, one of the things that we have talked about within our organization or as a family is the fact that there's a lot of new young leaders, as you said, or new influencers, or I know it'll catch on.
It's gonna get there, write it down.
And one of the things that we've found the most, especially as we are advising organizations, individuals, climbing gyms, is that these young new leaders lack the, I guess you could say, business education. Because if there's no mentors within the industry to show you how to lead, You know, like that kind of bridge isn't there. So they're going after very popular people like on social media and say, okay, you're part of this brand now. And then someone doesn't know how to navigate this aspect of the industry in order to create the proper influence and, how can I say it? Sustainable influence. Like the door's open, but how do you sit at the table? You know what I mean? So are you just passing through, you know? And the answer to the question to your bar is because not everybody drinks. And you get all ages in the climbing gym, just for you, Conrad. That's why it works so well. I wanted to know if you guys have felt that same way that I've felt, because I've mentored other people who've been around, and so has Jay. Do you think you have an idea or an answer to that aspect of that gap from everybody jumping in the last 4 years to saying, woo, brown people, yay, and then the brown people go like, okay, I'm here, now what? You know, we've seen some people fall on their face trying to navigate it, or it didn't work out well. Like, do you have a thought on that?
I have a thought on that, and it's interesting coming from photography and as far as apprenticeship, right? And I'm going to use this for an example. One of my main mentors right now is this man called Arturo Nunez. He was the CMO for Nike basketball. He's a CMO for Apple Latin America, and he is now the CMO for Nubank. And in my advice, it's a quest for knowledge, not for likes, right? And so when it comes down to that, it took me 6 years to get a face-to-face meeting with Arturo. 6 years. But once I did that, and I had like probably 4 different meetings, it was like grad school on overdrive. But something about it with Arturo, right? Sometimes people aren't ready for the knowledge that you're trying to get them. And you can only teach the people who are ready to learn. And so that's the hard part, right? You know, it's like, are those people ready to learn, or do they want to have likes? And so it's separating that difference of people who actually want to put in the work for lasting change versus the popularity contest, and that's just a discerning conversation. And I think you had something to add to it.
I guess I would just, I would say it's going to take time, right? When there has been a lack of participation, it takes time for things to catch up. And so I can understand on your side, right? You say that people have to be ready to learn. There have to be those outside of the circles of diversity that want to teach and build a certain level of relationship so that they can be the guides, right? And it takes time in order to build density of community. And once the density of community is able to sort of reach that scale, then it won't be as challenging, if you will.
Okay, well, I think that's it. I think we're on time. Thank you all for joining us. I think we got to give the room, sorry.